Hi, Gail.
Well, hi, Nuala. This is, I've been really looking forward to
Yeah,
doing this. Yeah.
me too.
Um, yeah,
So you were in Ballinglen. You had a few residencies at Ballinglen, I see.
I did. I did. One in, was it 2008 was the first one, in February when the weather was insane, just um, big squalls, off the ocean and um, trying to walk around in that because I didn't know any better. I'd get out in a squall and hang onto a lamppost, like, very impressive. And um,
Was the weather familiar to you at all? Because you live in Seattle, don't you?
yeah, it's kind of undramatic. It's beautiful, beautiful light. But um, I think of it as is kind of smooth. It doesn't. There'll be lots of gray days and lots of similar greens, and it's just a lot of drizzle and pretty the same all year round. With punctuated by some beautiful sunny days, that kind of thing.
Smooth is a really
Lots of
interesting.
drama.
I've never heard smooth used in when speaking about weather. I love it because it would be juxtaposed to a wavy, stormy.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I grew up in the high desert, in um, the western states, and there was a lot of drama there, which I was really attracted to, with light and shadow um,
Yeah.
and big dust storms, and it was. I, so coming to Seattle, I felt like I was kind of on pause or snooze or something. But, so I really liked that residency, that first one. Um, it felt good to be there with um,
And
all
the
that
two,
variability in the landscape and all that drama in the sky and all that sort of thing.
yeah. And the two works that are in the collection are from 2008, Ebb and Curl.
Right. And I should say, the way that I work, I often start from, a material that has some resonance for me. In 2008, back then, my mother had just died, and she was a seamstress, and she left me all this material, patterns um, and big bolt of interfacing, which is something I've used for several years now, because I was trying to layer things in transparent layers so that you could see through to the next layer.
Yeah.
And I was using a tea bag paper, and it didn't have any wet strength, So this was just it was something I had a huge amount of, and I could draw on it, I could layer it, which I did uh, a lot of.
Yeah.
So, and I really got started with it then. And when I went to Spain, southern Spain, with an artist residency that sadly no longer exists, but it was a really wonderful international residency but that fed right back into Ballinglen.
Yeah.
So I started those forms at that residency, and then carried on. I didn't finish anything. I just rolled up the pieces because I work that way in small increments, and then make them larger or smaller as I go. And I can roll everything up on a roll and take it with me. Um, so uh, so
Do
my
you
first
ever,
it was that, like that. Go ahead.
yeah, like the work that's at Ballinglen is they're, they sit out from the wall, but would you consider them wall pieces? Because most of the work I've seen of yours is is more ceiling based.
That's right. That's right. And the those, like that curl, that is in the collection. I was in southern Spain. I was looking at my mother's work and the patterns that she was using, and I was deconstructing like a ruffle and doing a line drawing of the ruffle. And then I kind of got that far, and hanging it on clotheslines and letting the light go through it. That happened in Spain, but when I came back to Ballinglen, then I started gluing them together and cutting them out.
Okay.
So it took a while, this is a very long process. I drag things along with me and combine and recombine. And I hadn't yet done any really large installations yet at that point.
Okay.
And the large installations were an evolution from that. Using those same forms, it's like how the scale and your body and how you look at something. You don't necessarily read ruffle. You can read sea stacks, the way the shapes they are. But
I do. I know.
You know.
Yeah. The clothesline might be something we have in common. Do you use the clothesline?
I use it. It's like my friend.
Okay.
I use it all the time.
Mine too.
Anywhere I go, I have a clothesline with me to put up and hang something on. So,
and do you think that's a women's work thing as well as the sewing pattern?
Yes, I do. It's also just a human common mode of work to hang up your wet clothes. And a story at my mother's funeral, I read a poem by Richard Wilbur from the 1950s, who wrote a poem about laundry. And for me, that was my first introduction to art, was her clotheslines, because they were so artfully done and such a part of life. And that poem was just amazing. It's called Things Call Us, or Love Calls Us to the Things of This World, which is a St. Augustine quote, and he wrote this most beautiful poem about that. And I based much of the installations that I did after that on that poem. I did a show called Bitter Love, where all the layers were glued together because I hadn't figured out how to pull them apart and install them.
Yeah.
That came later, but the clotheslines. And your clotheslines, or your lines with the spinning colors, and oh my God.
Yeah, well, you were here when I was working on the dream drawing, and I hadn't shown anything ever, well, apart from the clothesline of found material. But that felt very fixed, that object. But the dream drawing, the paper shapes that are moving, I was really nervous about it, and you really helped me that time you came to visit the studio. It was great to hear, to get your feedback on it.
Well, I related to that. It looked like an expanded your painting on the wall that I could see, like you blew it up and you pulled the layers out and put them in space, and I could relate to that.
Yeah. Personally,
as an objective. And for some reason, I remember it was very hard to do. It was very hard to actually, the first thing I did was cut out the overall shape, but it still had all these layers, and they got really thick and kind of unpleasant. But, and then at some point, just hanging them on the line and sitting and looking at them, you could see that they made their own dimensional world. So, and I thought that of your work as well.
The work that you have hanging it's translucent in that there's holes in it, and also translucent in other ways, but it has this real lightness while still holding a form. That I find that remarkable, that how you can hold a circular or a cone-like form.
The material itself has enough strength. It doesn't tear anywhere. You can't tear it like you can paper because it's a spun. It's not woven. It's spun out. Um, uh, and the shapes that you can get with it are from pinning it with just straight pins. And then so you just find the points of tension to make a circle, for instance, and you pin those together, and then it I don't know, then it starts taking a form that you're after, you know. And when I was working with my youngest son, who's also an artist, he was climbing high, and you know, and I'm on the ground, and he's climbing up into the ceiling, and started pinning things in arches too, and then we just continued with that. And I don't know, it just evolved as we kept doing different installations. But it's
So
the picking and the tension in the pieces and the lightness of the fabric too. It doesn't weigh anything,
yeah.
which is great because that's always a problem, right? Like if you're in a building and it's heavy, so that's opened up a lot of possibilities.
And do you draw on the material as well?
Yeah, yeah, and it's permanent marker. You know, that's what that will accept. You
Yeah.
can't draw on it with pencil. Um, so there's a lot of, and I can, you know, just freehand, you know, the line drawings, and then I can trace those because it's thin enough. I can lay other things on top of it and then make alterations to the traced piece, and then just keep building. It's an accumulative process.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's, you know, I just keep adding. It's additive, I guess,
Yeah.
but it's open.
But it looks like you use paint as well. Do you
It's there's a different things I've experimented with. When I was at Ballinglen in 2010, I didn't and 2008, I didn't bring anything with me except for that material and some pens. So I didn't bring paint, and I was a little bit lost. Um, but there were really strong tea and coffee dyes, which are kind of fugitive, but they are fugitive. Like there's a lot of things I've done that have just faded away. But they're beautiful colors, and so that hence the color of that stuff. But then I learned to mix it with a slurry of acrylic so that they aren't as fugitive. You know, it stays embedded in that really thin um, slurry, for lack of a better word. I pour the coffee, you know, like the instant coffee makes a great dye. So, hence my teeth. I think sometimes. Anyway, yeah. So they're natural dyes, but then I applied them unnaturally with acrylics. So
yeah.
Eventually, because I wanted to fix the color a little more.
And
And the blue in Curl is acrylic. It's a couple drops of that and a whole lot of liquid acrylic,
yeah.
very thin, and then just applied to that fabric, and then it has to be dried on a clothesline or it'll stick to wherever I've alter the table permanently or the wall. So I have to use clotheslines to dry it. So then when I'm working, I'm walking in the clotheslines.
Mm.
So I can get more of an idea of how that might work together.
Yeah.
It's just process.
Do you use shadow then?
Yeah, I mean, it just happens, the shadow. The quality of light that I'm after is that kind of oblique light, I suppose, that comes sideways into places, especially if you're inside somewhere. So, like that might come through a barn loft window or something that shoots down, that sort of thing. That's kind of what I'm looking for. And uh, the direct light on it sometimes doesn't work. It's more like the oblique kind of shaft of light that will light up the colors and whatnot. And that's the installation that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And when I did curl, I hadn't done an installation yet, except in the studio while I was working, and I didn't recognize them as something I could do elsewhere. So, or didn't have an opportunity to try it elsewhere.
Yeah, it's funny how long it can take us sometimes to see what's in the studio as something that may be finished already.
That's really true. I think the impulse to work that way was practical, but it was also it made me comforted because it was how my mother worked, and it made me there were childhood associations of sitting under the clotheslines and that were quite pleasant, and so I would just started doing it that way. So it had a multifaceted kind of motivation, I guess.
Yeah. And did you find that you were in Ballinglen 2008, 2010, and then when I met you in 2019, did you find that you picked up a similar motif every time you came back, or was it very different? Was each time a different experience, or did they overlap in ways that?
That's a good point. I think the thing that was the most compelling and the same was, again, the weather for me. I liked how what I looked at shifted all the time. That was just so inspiring. I tend to, if you look at some of my drawings, I'm really nailing it down. Like I'm really nailing down a form, and you can see how hard it is, and I liked it that I couldn't nail it down. And so that was the same every time. And
Yeah.
I was more aware of it each time. Because at first I just think, well, damn it, it's gone. What happened there? I was looking at that. It's not there anymore. But that's it. The landscape is remarkable. And again, taking something that started from the line drawing of a ruffle and looking at these sea cliffs and the layers remind me of the Grand Canyon, in the US, the layers of time that are recorded in the cliffs. The ruffles remind me of that as well, just the forms, and like you see the alluvial fans, in Death Valley, and that I love traveling in that country and seeing the earth laid bare like that is really humbling and good for me.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. The history is completely obvious here. You can see the layers of it somehow, and
I like that. I like that about the desert and seeing things exposed that way. I think one of the things when I moved to the Northwest as a young adult, and the lush forests and stuff, they were beautiful, but I found them unsettling because I couldn't see what, there's literally trees touching overhead. Of course, I love it now. I've spent a lot of time hiking in the Northwest and love it, but I remember finding it kind of unsettling. That it was. I like the bog lands too. I love that openness, and noticing the moss and the plants and how they grow, and it's and how they're spongy when you walk on them, and because they're little towers that go down into the earth. They're just it's just exciting. So I like that.
you sent me a few drawings that have a sort of flat bottom and then a rounded shape. Have you made those other places, or were they specifically of here?
No, specifically, I started those when I was there this last time, like doing little tiny sketches. It's mostly what I did is small things when I was there, just little notebooks full of sketches, and then I took them back home and worked on them, made them bigger, changed the scale again, um, and just pencil and on drafting film, so that you could really work into it hard, with an eraser.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I started those. I started them there, but I've been thinking about it a long time. I couldn't figure out how to. I like the the bogs, the tower of thinking of it growing on itself as it grows down through the earth, and then it makes these incredibly spongy mounds of uh, vegetative matter. It's just they're really amazing to me and so lively, so quietly lively. They're pretty intense.
Yeah.
The first version of that I put that line that delineated what was underneath is what that was for me, and I tried a whole little tower underneath, but it just didn't look right. So I just left the line at the bottom to show that flatness, um, which looked more interesting to me on that piece of film that I was working on. So yeah, and yeah, can relate to that, looking for and it's like that there too. The ocean working away on that seacoast, and everything changing, and things becoming exposed that weren't there. That a month prior or something, you come back and there's a whole thing there, that has been exposed by the water, and uh, um, that just sense of time passing.
Yeah.
It's interesting and changing.